Are those two different characters? I feel like those are two different characters. Look at that arm effort. I'm actually holding up a hardback. Hey friends, it's Spence. Today I will be doing the Midyear Freakout tag. If you aren't familiar, the Midyear Freakout tag is a very popular bookish tag that people on Booktube do about the middle of the year to kind of like look back on the books that they've read and kind of like have their initial favorites and like dislikes, and then also looking forward to the rest of the year. I'll have all the questions of this tag linked down below. The first question is, best book you've read so far in 2022? That would have to be Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Before I get into it, can you just like appreciate the fact that I'm actually holding a physical book right now, because I normally am too lazy to hold up books. Like, wow, like look at that arm effort. I'm actually holding up a hardback. Anyway, now that the self-congratulations is out of the way. Piranesi is an adult fantasy, and I don't want to specify exactly what subgenre of fantasy this falls in, because this is one of those books that you just have to get into it knowing as little as possible. So here are the only things that I'll tell you about this book. So this book, we follow our main character who lives in this world that's basically like this huge house that has like endless halls and is flooded from time to time, and it has a lot of mysterious statues. And this book is written in kind of a diary format where he's writing his observations about the world around him. I loved this book so much, obviously because it's the best book that I've read so far. Like, it's near perfect. I love Susanna Clarke's writing. This is the first book of hers that I've read. I'm excited to get to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I just loved how everything just like unraveled, how little things are revealed to you until we get to the point of the story where you get what's going on, where you understand what exactly is happening, and it's just the most satisfying thing I've ever read. And I actually want to reread this because I feel like it's going to be a whole different experience, like just knowing what I do now, kind of getting back into this book. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far in 2022. So I haven't read a ton of sequels this year so far. I'm hoping to get to more. But the best sequel I've read so far is The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman. This is the second book in the His Dark Materials trilogy, with the first book being known as The Northern Lights or The Golden Compass. Since this is a sequel, I won't get into the details of this book, but basically after the events of the first book, we follow our main character as she goes into a completely new setting, and we're introduced to more characters from another world. The thing about this trilogy is that there's nothing like absolutely mind-blowing about it. It's just that I enjoy reading the book so much. I love Philip Pullman's writing, and I love the setting. I love the themes discussed. So there you go, Subtle Knife. Next question, new release you haven't read yet but want to. That will have to be Freddy vs. the Family Curse by Tracy Badua. This is a middle grade where we follow a Filipino-American teenager named Freddy who is cursed, and he loves hip-hop, and he's super tight with his cousin Sharky. And all I know about this story so far is that Freddy owns an amulet that is cursed, and the amulet contains the soul of one of his great-grand-uncles or something, who was a Philippine scout during World War II, I believe. I'm really excited to get into this because I've heard that it's like super fun and touches a little bit on Philippine history, especially like the Philippine Scouts, so I'm really excited to get into that. Hopefully it'll be available in the Philippines sooner than later. If you want to get it for me, my wishlist is in the card down below. Next question, most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and that would have to be Stolen City by Eliza A. Bonin. I read her debut novel, Dauntless, not too long ago, and I absolutely loved it. And it was an adult fantasy, but Stolen City is actually a sci-fi. And editing Spencer here, that is actually a lie. Stolen City is also a young adult fantasy, and we follow twin thieves who are trying to reclaim their nation that's been colonized. I think that's what it's about. All I know so far is really just that the main characters are brothers, I believe. And that's all I need to know because I went into Dauntless not knowing really what it's about. I just want to treat Stolen City kind of the same way because I enjoyed Dauntless so much. I loved the adventure. I love Eliza Bonin's writing. I especially love the world building, and the plot was just like super engaging, so I expect nothing less impressive for Stolen City. If you want to pre-order any of these books, by the way, I'll leave the pre-order links down below in the description for both Dauntless and Stolen City. For Dauntless, I can kind of speak for it that it's really good and I highly recommend you pre-ordered it. For Stolen City, not just yet. Next question is biggest disappointment, and that would have to be autobiography. This is a MLM romance by Christina Lauren, the author duo. And here we follow our main character who attends this writing seminar, and he meets the TA, who is kind of a fellow student, who's a senior, who's this uptight Mormon boy, and he recognized feelings for this TA. Later on, he suspects that this TA might also be gay. I had high hopes for this book because I really wanted something that I could relate to, having had kind of a similar upbringing and kind of wanting to be represented in a book. And while I do think most people will enjoy this and most people will love how the romance was depicted and so on and so forth, this just did not work well for me because I just could not suspend so much disbelief because I knew the inaccuracies and mistakes that the author duo made when it comes to representing Mormonism. There were just like a lot of little details that I was like, that's not how things work. And I'm saying this coming from a place where I'm not part of that anymore and I am no longer trying to be like all defensive about the religion. It's just that because I knew better about how like Mormon culture works, I just could not suspend so much disbelief in this, and this ended up falling flat for me. But again, if you are not from that background, I would actually recommend this to you. I think this would be a very fun, Pride Month read because this is an MLM romance. Next question, biggest surprise. That would have to be The Sleepless by Victor Manibo. This was a surprise in a good way because this is a sci-fi, speculative fiction, and a mystery sort of murder mystery thriller. And I did not expect to love it as much as I did because these are genres and subgenres that I don't normally gravitate towards. I would discourage you from looking at the Goodreads summary of this book or the blurb because I feel like it spoils so many things that you don't learn until like a quarter into the book and beyond. But The Sleepless is set in the not too distant future, about like a decade or so from now, where there has already been another pandemic, and this pandemic makes people sleepless, and sleepless is kind of this condition where people can't sleep and don't need sleep, and this affects a quarter of the world's population, and this looks at how like the repercussions of such a pandemic. Our main character is a sleepless and he's a journalist, and he one day walks into his office and finds his boss dead. Most people think it's a suicide, but he has a very strong feeling that it's not, but he can't quite pinpoint why he feels that way. But I love the writing in this book and I love the pacing. It was so well executed, how just the murder mystery unraveled and just how things were revealed. It was also very action-packed. It almost read like watching a Jason Bourne movie. Highly recommend this one actually, so check it out.
Check it out!
Next question, favorite new author, either a debut author or new to you. I'll go for new to me, and that would have to be Hannah Alkaf, hopefully I'm saying that right, author of Queen of the Tiles. This is my first read from Hannah Alkaf. I've heard her other books are also really good, but I loved Queen of the Tiles because it was so intellectually stimulating. That's the best way I can describe it. This is a young adult mystery thriller. It's kind of a murder mystery, but it's more on like the mystery thriller aspect of it. And we follow our main character Najwa, who is a Scrabble master, and she is returning to a big Scrabble tournament where she and her best friend used to play, but the last tournament that she's been in, her best friend suddenly died, and so now she feels that the best way to kind of overcome her trauma was to just, get back into the game. But then she starts receiving these weird Instagram messages that kind of hint at like knowing how and why her best friend died the previous year. This was just so well written. Like, first and foremost, I love this book. It was so enjoyable, but I really marveled at how masterfully Hannah Alkaf constructed the whole plot and how just everything about this book, the writing and the construction of the plot, the pacing, also the characterization. I loved our main character. She might be one of my favorite characters of the year. I love how her emotions are portrayed, and yeah, this is overall just a really impressive book. So I highly recommend you check this out.
Check it out!
Next question is new fictional crush. And that would have to be, even though I kind of struggled with reading this book, that would have to be Emery Andin from Jade City. I know a lot of people are telling me that like there's so much more that happens to Andin in the next books, and I don't want to think about it because I'm worried. But I just really am in love with Emery Andin because he's Emery Andin. And anyway, let's not get into it. Next question, newest favorite character. And this is going to be not exactly unpopular, but maybe unexpected, and that would have to be Pentry from Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes is a debut novel by Travis Baldree. It has taken book Twitter by storm, also I think Book Talk, and once it's republished by Tor, it's gonna take the world by storm because this is just a masterpiece of a novel. It's about an orc named Viv who abandons her days of fighting and decides to open up a coffee shop in this new town. It's cozy fantasy, it's found family, what more could you ask for? And I love Pendry. He's my favorite character in that book, although all of the characters pretty much can be a favorite. I love Pendry mainly because he, if I remember correctly, he's like the scholar, and I relate to that. And he also is passionate about music. Are those two different characters? I feel like those are two different characters. But what I'm sure about is that Pendry is he loves rock, and it's not explicitly stated that he loves rock, but it's implied that that's the music that he plays, and he kind of helps out with his coffee shop by, you know, performing for an audience. And I just found it to be endearing. So maybe that speaks to my taste in real life people. Anyway, let's not get into that. Next question. Book that made you cry. That would have to be, well, I actually didn't cry from any of my reads, which would like physically cry, but I would say the closest I've gotten to like crying and like being super emotional would have to be from A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. This is a literary fiction / contemporary, and this is about a man called Ove, who's this grumpy curmudgeon, and this is just kind of an inspection on how he views life and how he treats the people around him. He's recently lost his wife, and he is just, you know, devastated, and he just wants his life to end. That sounds super sad, but I actually felt more emotional about this book because of how happy this made me. Because one thing that people don't talk about when they talk about this book is the found family that it portrays. Like, people don't talk about how found family is in this book as much as they should. But yeah, I absolutely love this. Highly recommend. Next question is a book that made you happy. That would have to be The Last Kids on Earth by Max Brallier. This is very lighthearted. It's not a favorite by any means, but it did make me happy because it was just such a light read. It's a middle grade. It's post-apocalyptic, where we follow our main character after his world is infested by zombies. These monsters invade and take over his town, and all the adults have left town and left just the kids. So it's just the kids trying to survive in this town infested by both zombies and monsters. Reading this was like watching an animated series, which it has been adapted into a Netflix animated show, which I also highly recommend. So if you're just looking for a quick read that's super lighthearted and fun and doesn't take too many brain cells, I would recommend this. Next question. The most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received? And that would have to be The Search for Wandla. I bought this secondhand. It's not exactly the prettiest thing in the world, although I do kind of love the cover. But what I love are the illustrations. Since inside, I don't know if you can kind of see it. Oh, it's not showing illustrations. Anyway, there we go. Can you see that? I don't want to stretch it too far. But I love the illustrations of the book. This was written by and illustrated by Tony DiTerlizzi. You may be familiar with his illustrations. You've seen them in the Spiderwick Chronicles. And I'm excited to get into this. I haven't read it yet, but soon I will. And finally, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I'll split that in two. I really want to just read everything in my physical TBR so I can just, you know, not feel guilty about owning those books. And then there are series that I really want to buddy read in the future. So for my physical TBR, I need to finish the School for Good and Evil trilogy. I need to read The Inheritance Cycle. I need to read the sequel to The Peculiar, which is The Whatnot. And as for series that I want to get into for the rest of the year, I want to finish the Greenbone Saga, so that's Jade War and Jade Legacy. I want to finally get the Grishaverse out of the way, specifically just the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology, because at this point I'm just like super late into the game and I just want to get it over with. And then finally, I also do want to at least start the Septimus Heap series because I've heard so many great things about it. That is it for my mid-year freakout tag. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please do like, share, subscribe, comment down below any of your answers to any of the questions. And again, I'll have pre-order links for Dauntless and Stolen City by Eliza A. Bonin. That's it, everyone. Have a good day.